All right, so we're going to get started on 3D. I'm going to keep it kind of basic, but I am going to add something that you guys don't see in the book. So the book is going to ask you to do 3 projects in 3D, and I'm going to add a 4th project just because that 4th project is a nice segue into doing a 3D version of the toe stop, which is going to be optional for you guys. So I wrote on the screen just so you can see there's 3 things that you have to do to get yourself into that 3D mode. You have to switch yourself to 3D modeling workspace, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Change your view to southwest or southeast isometric, either one, and change your visual style to conceptual. So I'm going to show you how to do all of those things. I'm going to just open up another tab so we have a blank drawing. All right, so first what we're going to do is set ourselves to have the 3D modeling workspace. If you guys don't have this workspace pull down on your quick access toolbar, just click here. Remember, this is where we did show menu bar, where you get the pull down menus. There's one on here called Workspace. I like using that the best just because it's there and I can see it. I can always glance up and see what workspace I'm in. Another place that you can get your workspace is where it looks like a gear down here in the bottom of the screen. So I can change my workspace down here, or I can change it up here. There are 3 different workspaces that AutoCAD gives you by default. We've been working in this drafting and annotation, which is a 2D workspace kind of world. There's one called 3D Basics, and I love the idea of 3D Basics, but when I click on 3D Basics, look how big those icons are. Like my ribbon changes, I get more options, I get more stuff to choose from, and I love how big everything is, but I can't find everything that I need when I'm really doing 3D stuff in here. So I am curious, for the sake of this project, this actually might work for you guys because it's a pretty simple project. But the one that I end up working in the most is 3D modeling. So I set it to the 3D modeling workspace. And notice the ribbon changed still, but I don't have those really big, kind of easy to use, simple looking icons. I've got a whole lot more going on here. But so I'm technically in the 3D mode right now, but if I were to draw a box right now, oh my gosh, it's taking a long time, versus a rectangle, they look identical when I'm right now. So just switching yourself into 3D mode does not make it look 3D. I just drew one 3D box and one 2D rectangle, but they look identical. It's not until I change what kind of view I'm viewing this thing at, and that's where I'm going to pull down under this View tab. I'm still in the Home ribbon, but at the View tab, I'll pull this down, and I've got all of these different, oops, not that one. I'm going to pull the second one down here, and I can choose what kind of view I want to view this thing in. There's southwest isometric and there's southeast isometric. You can choose either one of those things. I want to say, let's just do southeast. Now that I put myself into southeast isometric, you can tell I've got a 3D box that actually has depth along the Z axis. When I was in 2D world, let's go back to a 2D drawing. Notice my UCS only had an X and a Y on it. It actually has a Z, but the Z is coming out towards me. So I've been doing it flat on the XY plane. Everything that I've been doing is flat, like on a sheet of paper. But when I set myself into that isometric view, now my UCS changed, and you can see all 3 of those axes. So now I've got an X, a Y, and a Z. And then you can really tell the difference between just my flat little 2D rectangle, what you guys have been drawing this whole time, versus my box, which is a 3D solid box. Excuse me. Sorry for you guys listening to that on a microphone. So now that I've got myself into the 3D modeling mode, got me the ribbon that I need, putting myself into an isometric mode, I can actually see that it's 3D. And then we're going to talk about the different visual styles. So these are visual styles that I can choose from. There's 2D wireframe, which is what we've been drawing in this whole time. There's one called conceptual. This is actually my favorite one because conceptual, it actually takes light and cool shades of a color. Let me show you an example of that. Let me go to layers. Here we go. I'm going to make a layer called red. And I'm going to make it red. And I'll set that current. I'm going to make a copy. And I'm going to make this one red, just so you can see what's going on. So that is not red. It takes warm and cool shades of the color red, and so I've got kind of a purpley orange kind of object here. It's easier on the eyes, but I feel like it does a good job of giving you the sense of depth for an object. Hidden takes those boxes and it makes them look hidden. So it hides the back. You can really tell they're solid. It's not like a wireframe where it's see-through. And realistic, whoa, that's a really bright red. So it gives you the really realistic colors. And then shaded does not look any different. If I were to apply materials to these objects, realistic would make it look like brick or wood or like whatever material I applied to that object, whereas shaded, you would just see the color red, whatever color that layer is. So there is a difference between those two, but since we're not dealing with materials, you can't really tell a difference. And then there's also shaded with edges. Just watch, keep your eyes on an edge. You see how it just kind of outlined those edges for you? That's nice to do sometimes. Visually, it helps. Shades of gray, I don't know, it turns everything gray, and I don't know why you would want to do that. Unfortunate timing. They literally came out with that right when that book series came out. It was awkward. Sketchy. I love Sketchy. Look how cool that is. It takes those lines and it actually like does a lot of overlap. It overhangs the edges. It makes it look like a sketch. This is totally awesome for when you want to be really, really precise. You've drawn something in 3D. You want it to look precise, but you want to maybe do a cover page that looks a little more artistic, like you maybe sketched it. It's always nice to have a nice artistic cover page. So you can make it look sketchy, and then you can, you know, shade it in, take it into another program and apply colors to it. Or sometimes print it out and actually do like a watercolor or colored pencil or something on it. So that's an option. And then this is a 3D wireframe. Really not much different than the 2D wireframe. I honestly don't even, I think at one point in time I knew the difference. The only thing I see different is watch that little UCS. It got all colorful for me. And then in 2D wireframe, it's not colorful anymore. Really not much of a difference there. And then this one is X-ray mode. And so if I were to make a copy of, let's say, this box and then put it back here, so you can kind of see through the object like that. Maybe you want to put yourself in X-ray mode. I don't really use that very often. My favorite is just to put it in conceptual, and it's just a nice, kind of easy on the eye way to tell. It's a good sense of depth. If you're working on really, really big projects and you're rendering and you've got a lot of materials and you've got a lot of 3D objects, they do recommend putting yourself into a wireframe mode, just because AutoCAD, every time you pan and zoom and move, AutoCAD is trying to regenerate your screen as like a 3D model, and it's a lot of drag on the visual video card and the computer itself. So if you have huge projects, you might want to put yourself into like more of a wireframe, or at least a hidden version, instead of these shaded conceptual views. All right, so gosh, I'm going to keep it simple. Normally, no, I'm just going to keep it simple. There are commands that you can do to get yourself between 2D and 3D, and that is actually what we're going to be using here. So I'm going to draw out some lines. I'm just going to draw a regular shape with the line command. I'm just going to come over here and just draw whatever. C for close. If you hold down Shift and the wheelie ball, like press the wheelie ball like it's a button while you're holding down Shift, you can actually orbit, and you can see where it looked like I was doing just kind of a flat object. It is actually, this is what's tricky about getting into 3D, it was dipping down on that Z-axis and I couldn't tell it from where I was. If that happens to you, I always check myself, because the next steps that I'm about to do will not work unless these are all flat on that XY plane. If you just highlight everything, right click and go to properties, and then start Z, type in 0, and end Z, type in 0. So now everything is flat on that 2D axis. It screwed up the shape of my object, but what are you going to do? Maybe I'll just do this. I'll just delete out those lines and just connect the dots here. Here we go. So I've got a perfectly flat object. Anytime you want to get yourself back into that isometric mode, because I've kind of been, you know, doing this, you can either do this pull down and then choose your southeast isometric, or you can click on this. This is called a view cube. You can click in the corner right there, and it just kind of resets and puts you back into that perfect isometric mode. All right, so these are individual lines. I'm going to make a few copies of this, and I want to show you some things. All right. What we're going to be doing is we're going to take our objects and we're going to do the bracket, the tool holder, and the tool slide, and then the flange bearing. The flange was not in the book. That's something I'm adding because there's cooler, more advanced commands that you're going to need for the flange bearing. But what we're going to do is we're going to take your flat 2D stuff that you've drawn and we're going to extrude it. We're going to give it depth along the Z axis, and that's going to make it 3D. But let me show you the extrude command. It's this guy right here, extrude. I'm going to click. I'll select those objects as what I want to extrude. Watch what happens. Is this making it 3D? It is 3D. It's got some depth along the Z-axis, but it's not making it into a 3D solid. It looks more like a cookie cutter, right? What I want is for it to be solid. So the point here is you cannot extrude a line. You can technically extrude a line. You're just not making a 3D solid when you do it. So the extrude command will not work for a line. You have to make it into, gosh, I'm going to undo that. That's horrible. You have to make it into a polyline. You can extrude a polyline. And so I could either come over here and draw with a polyline, or if I already have something drawn, I can do modify. And remember that one with the two arrows that touch each other? That joins these to become one object. So it joins the line segments into one long continuous polyline. So join, I can select the same object, press enter. And now when I hover over it, I can see it's all one piece. And so I'm going to say extrude, select that object, press enter when I'm done selecting, and I have a 3D solid. Dude, like that's it. This is 3D. It is that easy. This is it's cool. It's fun. Other ways that you can do it, and your book is going to talk about these. There are several ways to get yourself into 3D. These two ways that I'm showing you are not actually my preferred way to do it, but I gotta show you. So I'm gonna draw this guy right here, I think. Yeah, region. What we're gonna do is draw a region. So this, remember, these were individual lines. This is not a polyline, and we can't extrude polylines. But if I select all of these, oops, press enter, it makes a region out of it. And what that is, it's basically a flat surface. It makes a surface right there. And then I can extrude. I cannot extrude lines, but I can extrude a region or a surface. So now when I say extrude, I can select that surface, enter, and then I just give it whatever height I want to give. I can type in a height of 10 or whatever it is I want to do. I've just made that. Instead of doing the join command to make it a polyline, I did the region command to put in a flat surface there. Here's a problem. What happens if I have a circle here? Oh, he looks like a little chameleon or lizard or something, doesn't he? Like that's his mouth and his eye. All right, so I want to extrude, but I need that to have a hole in it right there. So I'm going to select, oops, can't do it. I'm going to region or join. Let's just join. Join all that together, but this isn't touching anything, so it's just a free floating little guy here. And I want to extrude, pull all of this up, and I've got chameleon with this guy right here. If I were to move this out of the way, it did extrude it because I selected that as a part of the extrude, but it didn't make it a hole. It made it into a cylinder. And cylinders we use all the time in 3D. That is how you're going to get a hole out of something. You have to make a cylinder first. And then what we're going to do is subtract it from the object. So I'm going to undo to put that back where it goes. I'm going to step over here and talk just for a second about the subtract command. I'm going to type C for cube, and I'm going to make this a 10-inch cube. So I've got a 3D cube here. I'm going to also look at all these things that you can draw. I'm going to draw a sphere just for the sake of this. There's a sphere. I just drew a circle, a ball. I'm going to copy this 3 times, here and here. And these guys right here is what we're going to talk about now. We've got union, subtract, and intersect. If I were to say union, I select this object and select that object, 2 separate objects, press enter, and they're one object now. if I were to say subtract, the thing about subtract, I'm going to press F2 so you can see what it was asking me because it kind of rolled up. I didn't see this line, but it says select the surfaces to subtract from, or the solids to subtract from. I don't know about you guys, this is backwards from the way I think of it. I think I want to subtract the sphere from the cube. So I start with what I want to have gone, and then I say what I want to subtract it from. This is asking me for the opposite. In here, I would have to say from the cube, I want to subtract the sphere. I did have somebody one time point out, he was a math major, and he was like, mathematically speaking, that's how it works. You start with your big thing and you subtract from that. So if you're math minded, maybe that makes sense. For me, I have to, every time I do the subtract command, I stop and I think to myself, what do I want to subtract from? In other words, the first thing I click on is what do I want to keep? So here I want to subtract from the cube, enter. Then what do I want to subtract? The sphere, enter, and it takes a little bite out of it. So I just subtracted that object from it. This last one, we don't really use this much, but intersect, I select these two objects and it only keeps where they intersected each other. So one good thing about the intersect command is if you were to move this guy, pick him up, put him here, look at the little bite taken out. So, but this is still two separate objects, so you can see the line where those two objects are. And if I come over here and union, that line goes away. They're one piece now. So when you're done making objects, you're really going to make them out of the primitives. You're going to have a couple of rectangles, maybe you'll subtract a cylinder, maybe you'll subtract whatever. When you get it all built together, at the very end you want a union. That way you just get rid of any creases or seams or anything like that between the objects. Do not union before you're ready, because you can't ununion. There's no ununion command. You can explode a 3D if you do X enter or just regular explode command. The problem is you never explode 3D, because look what happened. I exploded it and it just became surfaces. It's hollow. There's no unexplode. You can't make those back into a solid object. You have to redraw it. So never ever ever explode 3D objects. You'll want to subtract what you don't want from it, but you don't want to explode. All right, now that we know what 3D and solid is, or I'm sorry, subtracting, I'm going to say subtract from a little lizard, or maybe it's like a little fish head, really. Then I say I'm going to subtract, ooh, let's see, you have to get right on it. That's what sucks about this. Subtract from this, get right on that guy, enter. And now shift and hold down the wheelie ball, and I can see I've got a hole through him. Do you see what I'm seeing? Doesn't that look like a little, maybe a fish head? Anyway, so, but that's doing it with the extrude command. So I had to join all those lines together, extrude, and then subtract out that cylinder that extruded with it. But check this out. This is a super sweet command. Let's go draw an eye on this guy. There is this other one, and it is called press pull. And if you've ever, have y'all heard of Google SketchUp? Or it's not Google SketchUp, it's just SketchUp nowadays. So I have a theory. In AutoCAD release 2007, it was a huge 3D release. That's when they came out with all of this stuff. So 2007 was released in 2006, just like 2020 is about to come out or just came out, and we're in 2019. They always release the next year in the previous year. So 2007 was released in 2006, which means they were working on it in 2005. And it was right around 2005, SketchUp was this kind of up-and-coming, small little software company, and it was really kind of getting a name for itself. And then all of a sudden, Google bought it. And then AutoCAD, like right at the same time, came out with this release of AutoCAD, that has all this 3D stuff. They totally ripped off SketchUp. Ashley's theory, and it's totally unfounded, I'm making this up, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. I think Autodesk tried to buy SketchUp, and then who can outbid Google? Like nobody. So Google bought it, and Autodesk was like, that's fine, we'll just rip you off. So I'm saying that because that conceptual mode that we have totally ripped off of SketchUp. The sketch mode, where the lines looked sketchy, totally ripped it off of SketchUp. And this next thing here, we have what's called press pull. In SketchUp, it's called push pull. Exactly the same command. They totally ripped it off. They did not exist before release 2007. So press pull, what's cool about press pull is it does not have to be a polyline and it does not have to be a region. It's almost like a hatch where if you just click somewhere inside, it finds the boundaries. You just click inside and you pull it up and you just press pulled that thing. Watch, it finds the boundaries. And look, as I'm making it, it recognized that circle as a boundary and it went around it. So I don't have to have a cylinder and subtract the cylinder. I just have it there and boom, I'm pulling it and it just press pulls for me. I go to press pull, I can click anywhere. Look at this, I can click on this edge and it pulls it out. I can click here and I'm going to go in. I can pull here and go this way. If I draw a circle right here and press pull that circle all the way through, that circle went all the way through. It went like if you look here, let's get a view here. Look at how crazy that looks. It knows that it's like this oblong, weird, elliptical thing. It just does it for you. So personally, when I'm doing 3D, almost entirely I do the press pull command. I don't do extrude. I just prefer it. I think it's easier to use. The only time that I do extrude when I need it instead of press pull is if I have a counter bore or something like that where I have a circle, like, you know, a counter bore is two circles. There's a little one and a big one. If I tried to do press pull, it would make the big one go all the way through. And I don't want that. The big one would only go down a certain distance and then the little one would go all the way through. So with stuff like that, I might do an extrude and then have those as cylinders, and I might press pull one down a little bit and the other one all the way through. So that's the only time I really would use extrude over press pull. So a couple of more things that you want to know in 3D is in 3D world, now that we have these axes, 3 different axes that we're working on, when we go to do things like rotate, if I were to do the rotate command over here, let's draw something. So I've got this and I went to do the rotate command, just this guy right here. Select the object, select a base point, and then I'm just rotating this around. We didn't ever think about it, but what I'm actually, the axis that I'm rotating on is the z-axis. It's rotating around the z-axis. I don't see the z-axis because it's coming towards me, but it's rotating around that. So it's rotating on the xy plane, which would be on the z-axis. Now that we're in 3D world, we have 3 different ways we can rotate this thing. We've got the x-axis, the z-axis, and the y-axis. So what we're going to do is we have a new command. We're not going to do regular rotate because regular rotate just assumes it's straight on the z-axis. Gosh, sorry. I feel bad wearing a microphone and coughing, but allergies. Okay, 3D rotate. I am going to, let's just select this guy. He's cute. I select it. When I press enter, look at this thing that happens. I get this, it's called a gizmo, and this little gizmo is my 3D rotate gizmo. And so what it's asking me at this point is, what axis do you want to rotate on? Before release 2007, I had to type in X, Y, or Z. I had to tell him which axis I wanted to rotate on, which is kind of hard sometimes. So we have this thing called the the right-hand rule. And the right-hand rule, you hold your fingers up. This is going to be hard to explain for you guys watching the video tomorrow. But you hold your fingers up and there's my Z, my Y, and then my, X, Y, and then my Z is coming out towards me. So what we used to do is, well, if I want to rotate it on my Z, I would do this, do that as my Y, do this as my X, and you would just sit with your hand in your lap and be like, which way do I want to rotate this object? And you would kind of just do that and figure out which axis you wanted to do. Here, though, we've got the gizmo, and so what's cool is it shows rings. Notice those rings are color-coded. I have a blue, a red, and a green. They're totally color-coded with my axis over here, if you look at the UCS. So rotating on the x-axis is, this is the x-axis coming this way, but I can see the pattern. I can see which direction it would rotate. The Y is green, the Z is blue. But what I can do is I can just, let's say I want to get this guy rotated up. So I might click on this. You just click on the axis. You can type, what is this? This would be the Y. You can type it, or you can Just click on it, and then notice I have my ortho on, so it's kind of locking it into 90-degree angles here. But I'm going to rotate it this way. That stays active, so now maybe I'm going to rotate it this way. You can rotate your object several times, however many times it takes, but that's the 3D rotate command. There's also a 3D move command. So you remember when I was first drawing those lines and I had like crazy stuff was happening along the Z axis and the X axis? That is the 3D, or that's the move command. I'm sorry, when you're working in 3D, you can't always guarantee. It looks like you might be making it flat or moving it just flush across the plane, you know, in one direction, but you might actually be going back and down a little bit because you're in 3D world. So instead of the regular move command, you can do this, the 3D move command. So I select this guy. When I press enter, I get another little gizmo, and this one is the move. So I'm constraining myself to just this axis, or just this axis. And so that's the 3D move command. The regular move command will work if you turn your ortho on, but it's a little bit different. So if I do regular move, as long as I have my ortho on, I'm kind of like locked into those 3 axes of movement, or 3 planes of movement. So that's it. Like, y'all know 3D now, so let's go in and we're going to do some 3D. I think I've covered everything that you need. So what we're going to do now is go in and start drawing some stuff in 3D. And I think what I'm going to do, so far this is a 26-minute video, so I'm going to pause. I'm going to stop this video, and then I'm going to do a separate video for my class tomorrow. One with just learning 3D, and then one showing how to do all the 3D. So